So we can get started with just like doing a quick check-in on how the last week went, any aha moments that you had about your schedule. Were you able to work on your schedule, or how you're feeling about transitioning into the ideal planning method? So if someone wants to go first, feel free.
I'll go. I mean, as I told you yesterday, I was feeling really overwhelmed, just like even like looking at this thing and thinking about having to think about my month ahead. But then after like breaking like the time down a little bit with you yesterday and kind of like sitting with that as well, it's kind of like there's a lot more time in the week than I see. And I am actually, this morning, I woke up looking forward to like visualize like doing this, like putting that time where it has to be, you know what I mean? I think that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Anyway, I'm feeling better about it than last week.
Good. That's great. Honey, how about you?
What opened up for me was that a couple of things. So I'm pretty well, my calendar is very color coordinated, and because I played the 6 games, and the 6 games in my life, one's about home, one's about health, one's about my business, personal growth, money, and the other one's writing. What I noticed was there, and then also the ideal method, planning method. As I looked at it, was like, oh, well, how you have it is basically Saturday and Sunday, and Wednesdays are like free days. And so I like to look at where am I actually taking my a day off or a time off, and it's in the evening. And so it's not really one day. But I noticed what got done was like a routine of when I'm doing my exercises, when I'm doing, you know, my quality of sleep, and then like, oh, I'm going to do like pay bills and stuff, do stuff about money. I'm not going to do that on Sundays. I'm going to do that Monday through Saturdays. And the one thing that I thought was really great about it was I renamed one of my game names because they have really great names. And so my writing and my creativity, I altered it from Vision Quest to Spread the Word. And it just lights me up. Totally. Just like, I just took on being an international speaker and an inspirational speaker. And just like each game had gotten more fuel in it.
Okay.
So.
That's awesome. Love it.
And I did notice, like, I run my games quarterly, that I broke it up into 2 weeks. And so basically, like how you have planning in 1 week and then next week is execution. Execution. I get it out. But it was like the plannings are on odd numbers and execution are on even numbers. And week 1 and week 13 are basically the same weeks. So I could even see it. Like we talked about it not last week, but the week before, about having a word that we're like living into. And I do, like I'm in the week of pleasure this week. But for a month, it's like gratitude. So it could be like, this is week 9. So it's week, gratitude. I picked the word gratitude, like the month for November. So it's week 9, gratitude and planning. Do you see how that is?
Cool.
So
Yeah, I love that. I love the compounding, like how the ideas are compounding, because you have a really interesting influence too, because you have your own method. And I love how it's
but
like
to be able to incorporate it.
exactly. Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. That's awesome. And I
Thanks.
love that it's like, I love the detail that you put into it of how you have your 6 games and then how you have a different focus. Like even the focuses that you put into our messages in the accountability club, I'm always like blown away by how you have the ideas together. And welcome to anyone who is joining as we're chatting. We're just doing a quick check-in from the work we did last week. Which is available in the recordings that Dan has posted on his website, as well as on the Wildly Digital YouTube channel. The videos are available there for you for the last 2 weeks. But yeah, that's super awesome, Patty. I love that.
Yeah.
And I love sorry, what did you say is what you renamed the writing category to?
Spread the word.
Spread the word. Like that just feels so much deeper.
Yeah, it does. It's deeper, and it's like it's the goal around it is not just the outcomes, but that there's beauty and boldness in my spread the word, my sharing. And then the other one I put is like this is the week, like today is pleasure and action. And what I'm looking at is like, where can I bring gratitude to that? So instead of just, name a word for the month, like how is that affecting the games I'm playing, the way who I'm being in those games?
Yes, it's like the being the player in your game. It just like gets deeper and deeper. And that's actually interesting because it brings up what Kat and I were talking about yesterday, and what Kat just mentioned about the number of hours that we have in a week, or the number of days that are in a week. Like we're always like, oh, I don't have enough time. But that was what Kat and I were doing yesterday, is she was feeling really overwhelmed by how do I organize my time? And she was looking at how I had restructured my calendar, which I'm going to show you guys in a second to show the transition. But I was like, well, just think about like the number of hours that you have and what you want to allocate your time towards. And I love, Patty, how you mentioned that your personal time, you're noticing that that's in the evenings and how important that is to you, but also giving yourself 1 day a week, which is something that Simon and I talked about last week, which Simon, I'll give you a second to do your update in a moment, but to speak for you is I challenged him to really take that 1 day to not focus on any of these responsibilities. So like to not talk about finances or to pay bills or business or any of that, and just give yourself that space to be free. How empowering that feeling is. So Simon, why don't you give us a quick update on how the last week has gone for you and any aha moments you've had about your schedule and what you've been working on?
So I'm honest, and I have to say, but this is my personality. Like I have Asperger autism, so I'm probably acting as very differently than other persons here in the world. And I'm truly acknowledging that Meghan's planning method is awesome. For my personality, it was even like it gave me a framework, but I worked even more than I did before. Like I was awake roundabout until 1 p.m., then 3 p.m. every day. And yeah, but the other thing is I have been through with my new systems through major quantum shifts, and like the reason why I worked so long is not because Meghan's planning method that does not align with my core essence, but it made click. And imagine you have your best friend that really resonates and understands you, and you haven't that friend before in your life, and you met him for the first time. How much hours would you spend by chatting with him? So that's the reason why it was worse than before from the time. But what I really like is I have now in my calendar since Meghan's planning method, I have like a structure where I can plan my day around. And that's what I really find useful. Like I have that core red structure that's like giving it layers. And then I can decide for myself if I want to follow that or if I want to move it in a way. But it's now structured than before. So that's what I can say even as an Asperger autism, that this is huge.
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself there. I think that's great. You brought up a couple of really interesting points because this process, I think, speaking to you mentioning the Asperger's portion and maneuvering autism, there are going to be some things that are going to work easier for you and others that aren't. And that's natural for anyone, regardless if you have a diagnosis or you're working with some sort of, let's say, limiting challenge that the status quo doesn't have. But that's where I find it really valuable, because structure in most circumstances brings things to life that we weren't recognizing before. So speaking to the Asperger's diagnosis, you know this, and anyone who's on the call who doesn't, is Asperger's can make you super focus on one thing for an extended period of time. So I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that you feel like you're working more, but that you have a core structure. So what this might open up for you as we move forward through the process and we bring more pieces into the ideal planning method, because really we're just scratching the surface here. We're building that foundation, which I'm really impressed that you did that with that core red focus of what your framework is. That's what we're working on building right now. But what it brings up for me is the boundaries, which is what we're going to talk about today. So it's actually a really good transition into the conversation going from our ideal month framework and our ideal week framework, but then what that brings to life as we're putting it into action. So for most of us, we're still in the creation phase, because like I said, I want to give you plenty of time to build this framework for yourself. So we're going to keep working on the framework this week and into next week. And depending on how we're feeling next week, maybe moving even into the following week, because that's the beauty of this, is that we want it to flow for everyone. So for example, Pat's not quite there yet with having what's going to work where and how things are going to work, but she's now understanding the core of her time. And then to compare that, Simon, to what you just said, is there's this piece of how we're utilizing our time. So if you're finding that you're staying up until 3 a.m. because you're working on things, it also could be reassessing those boundaries of, okay, I'm going to give myself a shut off time. I'm going to make sure I get those 8 hours of sleep every night, which is where moving from the ideal month into the ideal week really brings some things to the surface. So Simon, you and I talked about this after the call, is you have jumped ahead and gone right into the weekly planning, but there's still some pieces in the monthly piece and the yearly piece that are missing. And for anyone who's coming on the call fresh or watching the recording, this is where going back and watching that first video about the desire mapping will also really help you to identify what are the core desires of how you want to feel month over month. and how you bring that into what you do on a monthly, weekly, daily basis. Because similarly to what Patty has, it's one of the things that I challenged myself to do as I was rebuilding my schedule, is I put names around the times throughout the week of what I was going to be doing and how they subconsciously affect me. Like just, being more aware of that. So let me share my screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at. And for anyone who gets who's like kind of in the mindset that Kat was in, this may look overwhelming, but as I dig into it, I'll really show you the layers that come into play with it. Okay. So here is my updated calendar. So looking from last week, this was the existing plan that I had been using for the last, I would say, maybe 2 years even, 2.5, I don't know, give or take. And this was when I needed a lot more time to focus on Raina. I was still very much in new mom world. So I was navigating a lot of like, how do I create more time for myself? And it was no longer working. So to go with this plan, because one of my goals with leading these sessions is that I'm evolving with you guys. I may be teaching some of the strategies and techniques that I have, but I learn new things as I'm going through this process as well. So even what you just said about like how you're changing the names, I was like, I get that. That's totally what came up for me this week as I was changing my plan. So this is my updated schedule. And if we just start from like sleep all the way through to the end of the day. Sorry, just 1 second. Can you go outside and take the call? Just 1 second, guys. Sorry. Okay. So let's talk about sleep, because that's what, Simon, you had just brought up that point. So I think that's a really important thing to focus on first. And Patty, you mentioned it too, about when we're taking time for ourselves. Kat and I talked about this yesterday too. When we think about how many hours we have in a week, we have approximately 168 hours, I think is what Kat and I figured out yesterday. And immediately, why we think about ourselves personally first is because we need to eliminate that time to make sure we're getting the necessary self-care that we deserve as individuals to then serve our businesses and our lives fully. That starts with sleep. And the average person should be getting approximately 8 hours of sleep a night. So if you're not getting 8 hours right now, you're a highly functioning individual, but as we age, that sleep becomes more and more important. I know when I was in my 20s, like early 20s, and I'm sure we all remember those days, like even our young teen years, it felt like we could stay up all night and we could still function the next day. Now, fast forward, being 33, I'm like, oh my goodness, when my daughter is up in the middle of the night for a couple of hours, I can barely function the next day. And I've noticed that that's how important my sleep is. So when I was thinking about, okay, how many hours of sleep do I need to have? I recognized that there's nothing wrong with me liking to sleep in. It guarantees that I get that time. But there's also nothing wrong with me liking to stay up late, because the only hour that I really have to myself, or the hours I have to myself, is when my daughter goes to bed at around 9. So then by me going to bed around 12, especially when my daughter's with her father, I was like, oh, I can get a little bit more sleep. I can take that time. So I made my sleep time, which I love Google for this, it always puts in little pictures, blissful sleep, because that's what I crave. That's what I want. I want to be blissful while I'm sleeping, because that's the energy I want to bring in. Then I start my mornings with a magnificent morning. So at the beginning of the week, I have my morning, which is from 8 to 9. And you'll see this in the template that we looked at last week for the weekly planning versus the monthly planning of calculating the hour or the amount of time something's going to take. And I'll show that more as the week moves forward. But what I did in the notes is I gave myself the things that I want to focus on. So sleep in if I want to, have a coffee, pull a tarot card, daily journal prompt. And then on Mondays, I have a group called the Accountability Club, which we have been meeting on Mondays, which Patty is a part of and Kat is a part of. And if you want to join, you're more than welcome. It's a free group to be a part of. We're now moving our beginning of the week calls to Tuesday, but that doesn't mean that it's still not important for me to answer these questions on Monday, because that's what matters to me. So I slotted that into my magnificent morning. So what are my big 3 for this week? What are my big 3 goals I want to accomplish? What is my eat the frog? My eat the frog as a term, my eat the frog is the thing that I want to accomplish the least. And that should be accomplished first. Because as a recovering procrastinator, I can put things off for weeks. I don't know if you guys resonate that with yourself, but when it's, when it's something that like, you're just like, I know I have to do it, but I really don't want to. It could take 5 minutes to actually finish the task. But if our nervous system is like, nah, man, it can take weeks for us to finish it. Usually that happens to be around finances, maybe a big project you're working on, maybe your self-care, something that's been on my to-do list for 3 weeks. 3 weeks is organizing my clothes for my daughter. That's major. It's taking up so much space in my house, but I continue to not be able to do it. And I make it my eat the frog every week, and I attempt to accomplish it, because that's the goal here. Is we're just attempting to get things done. Nothing has to be perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. Perfection doesn't exist. But acknowledging the things that matter to us help us move forward more effectively. The third thing is I ask myself, how do I want to feel this week? And that's how I align back to my monthly feelings. And as Patty just said that she has a weekly feeling, I'm like, oh, I should add that in. How do I want to feel this week? So that's where just having that question now, I'm like, maybe I should do some planning ahead of time. Maybe I should be planning out the feelings that I have for all 52 weeks of the year. When we start to break that down into, right? I see Kat going, ooh, like it just changes the way we think about things, because when we're consciously thinking about how we want to feel, how we want to work, how we want to move forward, we're going to gain more momentum. If we allow ourselves to function on autopilot and we're not consciously thinking about what we want to get done. You have a question, Patty?
Well, not just not how we feel, but how we're actually being. It's like it turns into a way of being. Like, oh,
Exactly.
I'm being pleasure today. What's going to bring me joy? And I'm actually looking at that versus I got to do my duty. I got to do this task.
Exactly. And it brings more life to our day, where we're not functioning like robots. And surprisingly, even robots these days have more consciousness than we think. So that's funny, because that's something that Simon's been bringing in, is more of the technology support into his planning as well, which I'm excited to showcase as we move forward through the program. But you're right, it just makes us come to life. And that's really what matters most, is that we're living our lives. We're not robots. We have people who care about us. We care about other people, and we care about what we're doing. So if we're leading consciously and we're aware of what we're doing, that's what comes more into our life. So then if you move more into the daily. Okay, thanks. So daily planning, which I still have a couple of a couple of things I need to update here. I'm just noticing I didn't change the name of these. So let's look at work expansion, because anyone that still says WD expansion has changed to now be work expansion, because it's not just about the business that I've created over the last 6 years. I'm working with a partnership that I'm looking to evolve. So I want to bring that energy into it. Because for me, I don't look at the work that I'm doing with Simon as me just being an employee. I'm consciously putting all of my energy and power into how I help move his business forward and move my business forward. So I connected those. So, for example, I have client meetings. If there's a client meeting that needs to be filled, work on tasks needed to move Simon Marcus Global and Wildly Digital forward, implement new skills and processes into SMG and Wildly Digital, review client needs, their successes, and operational optimization. So again, this is just the framework. As I showed you guys before, in my work calendar, which I keep separate, this is where I have my work schedule, and I have necessary meetings. So I'm acknowledging energetically what I want to bring to fruition. But again, because it's just the framework, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be every single detail of what I'm actively doing within that month, because that planning comes into when I do my monthly planning at the beginning, middle, and end of the month, every single month, because that's going to change every week, just as our feelings change every week. What our responsibilities are constantly changing. So to become too connected to the intricacies of how we're moving our lives forward, we may not get the traction that we're looking to have. So that's why we take a step back in the ideal planning method, really think about the ideal scenario before we put it into implementation into the real world. It's why it's called the ideal planning method. We're working with ideals. And from the definition of the word, the ideal scenario 99% of the time isn't going to happen. But we're constantly working towards that evolution. And the closer we can become to our ideal life, the more value, joy, reward we should be extracting from the hard work we're putting into it, or the strategic work we're putting into it. Because we're flipping the script. It's no longer that the tasks that we need to get done, or the client expectations that we have, or the expectation of the organization that we're working with matter the most. We are now making sure we are feeling the foundation first, putting ourselves first as individuals, because those who are truly successful in life have already done that. So it's important that we feel the same way. We're not a cog in a wheel. Each person is individual and has their own goals, ambitions, way of functioning. And it's important that we honor that. And as society, some cultures do a better job than I would say our culture, meaning those who are from North America or from many European countries, not states. It's almost like we have been, Kat and I were talking about this yesterday, it's like we've been programmed from a young age that it's only about like, well, who are you going to be? What job are you going to have? What do you want to do with your life? Whereas Kat said it yesterday, she just wants to be happy. That's a desire. And based off of the foundation of desire mapping, which Michelle Laporte wrote that book, the desire map, it changes the way we set our goals. SMART goals are great for materializing what we want, but it doesn't necessarily happen because it may not align with our desires. And our desires are emotionally bonded. And our emotional bonds are what create actual change in our lives. It's why some people feel like they're not getting any movement in their lives, and they're sitting in stagnation because they're not thinking about what they want to feel like. They're only worrying about what they can accomplish. And money, accomplishments, success are outcomes. They're not something to actively work towards. So going back to the weekly plan, that's kind of what the work foundation that I have is. And then the other thing that I've layered into that is making sure I'm giving myself time for reflection. So during the day for work, I make sure that I have that half an hour at the end of the day to reflect on what has went well and what hasn't went well. At the end of the week, doing the same thing. So my end of the week review is review client needs, what got done, what didn't get done, what's the level of satisfaction that my clients have. Do a check-in with Simon, what got done, what didn't get done, update him on the client satisfaction levels that I've seen or have updated. And then a personal review. How do I feel energetically about what happened this week? And then if we look at more of the personal stuff going away from work, I've also planned in Raina's routine. So green is like a foundation of like things that are non-negotiables for me. Having breakfast, having lunch, having dinner, driving Raina to her class, picking up Raina, and then driving to work. Those are green because they have to happen. If they don't happen, then the rest of the structure doesn't matter. Because if I'm not fueled, then I'm not going to be showing up. Then you can look and you can see that there's Raina's schedule. So Raina's schedule during the week and what her non-negotiables are is like this lavender color. So what she's doing. And then on Saturday, the day is about Raina. So that's why I have a go with the flow day, but I still have a structure. And some of these things need to be updated, but I have a structure for how I handle her life because that's important to me. And then on Sundays, she doesn't have a schedule because on Sundays, it's my day to get my stuff together. So even though she's still there, it becomes more about, okay, how do I make sure I'm setting myself up for the week? What do I need to get done? This still says a rate of free day, but that's not true at this point. I have to update that. I missed that one. So see, I'm not perfect. There's still things that I need to update. But I set up the plan for the week. I do any meal prepping. And again, these are just ideas. It doesn't mean I have to do everything that's on this list. It's just that when I'm in the heat of the moment, if I'm like, I don't know what to do with my time today, I can look and I can see what I want to do. So then that way, I don't feel overwhelmed by not knowing what to do. And we don't sit there and just twiddle our thumbs or go into our phones and scroll and doom scroll for 2 hours because we're being conscious about the choices that we're making on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, yearly basis. And that's how the effort compounds. So I'll open up the floor to any questions about the weekly flow and any ahas that have come up for you so far while we've been chit-chatting. Yeah, Patty, go ahead.
What I thought was just, I do a planning in the morning of each day. You know, it's to plan and send information to my team. But also I was noted, aha for me was do an end of the day review on each day, not whether it's personal or whether, you know, it's about business. And in that could it also promises that that I heard, like somebody, it might not just be my promises, but somebody saying I need that person to call me. It's like get that information to that person, say, hey, that person needs you to call them, to further the, but it's just like reviewing it and putting in, you know, so those thoughts don't go, promises or requests or I need to put that in, doesn't disappear.
Exactly. Yeah, and I love that you noticed that. Because yeah, it's one of the things that for a lot of people, it's easy to think about, okay, I'm going to put my daily to-dos of what I want to get done today every day. Most of us start our work day that way. It's actually something with the businesses that I work with is mandatory. Like we have a chat that we're supposed to put our top tasks or the tasks that we're working on it every day. That's something that people forget is the end of the day because we're just so rushed to move on to that next thing, to get home, to do dishes, to make dinner, to go pick up our kid from work, that we're not catching up with ourselves of, okay, I set this expectation this morning. Did I actually get everything done that I wanted to get done? What do I need to carry over to tomorrow? Or what can I quickly get done right now as far as the promises or needs that you have? So I love that you noticed that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Or anything else, Patty?
No, it disappeared.
Okay, if it comes back, that's totally cool. Anyone else have any insights to share?
I was like, I don't know if I shared this with her, but I just wanted to say that I really like the idea of having a list that you can always like refer to, but I like that you're like, you don't have to always do this list. And I think for me, something I struggle with when I make a to-do list, like it causes a lot of procrastination because I know most of the time I'm not going to get all that stuff done. But like when I'm making the list, like all the ideas come out. So it's like this giant list happens, and then I'll get a couple of things done. And then I get mad at myself for not doing the things. And then I'm like, why do I make these stupid lists anyway? And then I stop making the list. And I've been stuck in this cycle for a really long time. So you just saying like you can have this list and it's just so that you don't have nothing to do, but it can be the list that you don't have to do either. I need a list like that. That's brilliant. And I love that. So thank you.
Good. I'm so glad that you got insight out of that. Because that's, you know what, I used to be the same. And that's where it kind of came from was, can't remember where I got it from. It was probably from like a video or some self-help book that I read in these years of creation of this process. But yeah, that I had the same thing. It was like, I'm constantly creating this crazy to-do list. And then when I discovered bullet journaling, I discovered brain dumping. And I was like, oh my gosh, brain dumping makes sense because that's essentially what's happening to you, Kat, when you're making your to-do list, is your brain's just unpiling all of the things that you've been storing in the back of your head and putting it on a piece of paper. But it doesn't mean that we all have to get everything on that list done in one day necessarily. And by having things that are like routine, that are things like that give you ideas of what you can do, then you don't get stuck in that procrastination, stagnation feeling, or analysis paralysis, as I like to call it. And then that's where the big three really come in handy too, because again, I'm not the expert on this. I could probably find an article and I'll post it in the recording when I post it on YouTube. But there's a theory around how many tasks we can actually functionally get done in a day. And that's why you pick 3. We're more likely to get more tasks done if we pick 3 main tasks that we want to focus on rather than trying to accomplish 10 tasks in one day. So you pick your top 3. These are the 3 biggest tasks I should get done today, and make those your priority. And if you have a giant to-do list, let's say that it's Monday morning, you're making this to-do list, you can make a priority T-chart. So on a piece of paper, do I have a piece of paper? Give me a second. I'm just going to draw this out so you can see a visual. So always carrying my bullet journal with me. And we'll get more into notebooks and bullet journaling as we move forward. But what you can do is you make a T chart. So you just draw a T on a sheet of paper. In the top left-hand corner, you put must get done. To the right, you put would be nice to get done. In the bottom left, you put what can wait. And in the bottom right, you put delegate. So that you get something that looks like this. And this is a really efficient tool for daily planning and organization and weekly planning. So you take that big brain dump, so you sit down with yourself and you write out all your brain dump to-dos. Could be 10, could be 5, could be 20, could be 100. Let's be real, sometimes they can get long. Then you make your T chart. And once you've written out all the thoughts, because that's the key to a brain dump, is just let your brain dump it all onto a piece of paper. Things will come to you on an ongoing basis. But then categorize them. I sometimes like to use a highlighter, or I'll put like a symbol beside it, maybe a star for must get done, a triangle for would be nice. You can put like whatever symbol comes to mind. Or you can put a stick, or you can cross them out as you move through the 4 categories and put them under the categories. So for must get done, limit yourself to 3. Draw a 1, a 2, and a 3. And really sit with your list and figure out what are the 3 biggest things I have to get done today. What do I need to do? Then you can think about what would be nice to get done. It'd be great. It could get you ahead of the game. It could help you function better. Again, non-negotiables like a client meeting or a deadline will outrank your top 3, but your top 3 just help you to not overwhelm yourself. Then you put your what would be nice to get done as any tasks, but if you get done the 3, you can move on to those ones. Then really question yourself, because you're probably going to put a whole bunch that would be nice. From those would be nices, which ones can wait? Maybe they're not due until next week. Maybe they can wait 2 or 3 days. Maybe there's something that you could send an email to get an update about, but you need more information to actually get it done. And then from anything else that's on your list, delegate it. If you're noticing that there's a ton of cleaning tasks on your list, and you're like, when am I going to find time to do all of this cleaning that I need to do? Probably a sign that you should hire someone to come into your house, even if it's just for a day, to help you get back on track. Maybe it's that you have organizational things that you just keep putting off and keep putting off and keep putting off. Ask a friend for help. If they're work tasks and you have employees or you have a virtual assistant, that's how you make sure that the money that you're spending on these employees and your virtual assistant, or your team in general, if you have multiple members on your team, are doing the work that's most important to you and that you feel like you're getting the greatest reward from. So that's a prioritization T chart. Patty.
What were the 4? That must get done, would be nice, delegate, but I missed the 3rd one.
What can wait?
What can wait? Okay.
Yeah.
And then, let me put this in there. Also, there's been studies done that our mind does not hold more than 8 things at a time. It's just impossible. So usually that 7th and 8th one that we've got there it'll just drop off. We'll never get to it. That's why I created 6 games versus 8 games, because you'll never get to that. And even even in the coaching that I've done, I've always noticed that there's, out of the 6 games, the 6 areas of life that are important to people, usually the 6th game, that there are 5 of them that really produce results in, but that's the struggle is on that sixth one. It's just like, I didn't get to it. I didn't get to it. And they're making themselves up because they didn't get to it, but it's like, it's in that it's in design of human being.
That's fascinating. I love that.
You know.
If you find any articles on that, can you send them to me? I'd love to read them.
Okay, I can't remember where I found it, but I probably could
No worries.
AI and come up with something that hits
Yeah,
on that.
yeah. You're right. You're right. So I'm sure I can come up with some hits myself. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we only have a few minutes left for today's session. Does anyone else have any comments about what we've talked about today? Any questions as we move into this week of optimizing and finding our framework?
Oh, and I just wanted to add that for me with those 6 games, I literally do a quarterly game plan and then break it down to the weekly action. So that it's like, what are the top 4 things that I want to happen in this game? You know, like if it's my well-being game, it's like walk and exercise daily and brush my teeth. It's like the mundane things, but it's like, this is the bottom, you know, the name of the game is called Body for Life. And it's like, I want balance and ease around my Body for Life game. And it's like, oh, I brush my teeth. You know, it's in my calendar. My calendar is like yours. It's all color coded. It's like, yeah, this is taking care of the body right now.
Love it.
Whether it's
I love
breakfast or, you know, it's like, but it's like those weekly actions of what I'm doing for my body. And you've noticed that with the stuff that I send to the accountability group. It's like, oh, I know, what am I doing for my body today? What am I doing for my coaching? What am I doing for my writing? What am I doing for my money? What am I doing for my personal growth? And what am I doing for my home?
Oh my
And
gosh,
it's
then you're gonna
right
love
there.
the next exercise that we're doing next. I love this. I love this. This is like the perfect segue into talking about 90-day planning or into 90-day sprints, because that's pretty much what you're talking about, right? Like,
Yeah.
with your own added beauty to it, which I love the 6 games. And I'm consciously going to be trying to get onto your Sunday calls. I'm hoping I can align it where it doesn't, because your call is right when Raina wakes up from her nap. So it's always a struggle for me, but I'm like putting it out there that I'm going to be able to come on your call so I can learn
Well,
more.
I have a lot of people that are actually working for that, and they just come on and they're off camera and they're mute, but they've got the earpiece in and just like, yeah, and just listen. And it's like, if you don't share, you know,
Good to know, for sure.
and it's
Well,
also
awesome.
recorded.
That's true. That's true. I could watch the recordings. So
Yeah.
I will find a solution.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that. And that leads into the exercise that we're going to do next. So we're going to do a check-in next week. And depending on how everyone's feeling, if we need to dig more into weekly versus monthly planning, we won't be doing this next week. It'll be the following week. But depending on how the conversation goes and how everyone's doing with their schedule, our next activity is 90-day planning. So we're building a 90-day sprint. So it's pretty much what Patty was just talking about. Just to give you a little bit of insight on what's coming next, is we're going to talk about how to organize our next 90 days. The shift to it is that we're going to bring in the zodiac. So we're going to build a moon phase calendar of the next 90 days. So we're going to work on that together. So I will leave you with that. If there's anything that comes up, any questions that you have, any insights that you get, whether you're on the call today, you're watching the recording, or you join in the future, always feel free to send me a WhatsApp message. I am available to answer your questions. I love talking about this. Obviously, you can tell. So if there's anything that you need from me, I am always available to communicate. Sometimes it takes me a couple hours to get back to you, but usually I'm pretty good at getting back within 24 to 48 hours. And yeah, I wish you luck with building your framework, and I look forward to seeing all of you on next week's call, same time, same place. And I hope you have a fabulous day. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank you very much for a great
Thank
call.
you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
How to leave here.